Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is James O'Neill, and I'm here to share a story that changed my life forever. A story so unforgettable, it might just change the way you see your own. Buckle up, because this is one journey you won't want to miss. Have you ever gone on a date so unforgettable it left you questioning everything? Well, let me tell you about mine. A night that started with high hopes, but ended with an unexpected twist. They say life begins at 40, but what they don't tell you is that love can take its sweetest and sometimes strangest turns much later. My name is James, and at 64, I thought I had seen it all until I met Sandra. This is the story of our unforgettable dinner date that taught me more about life and love than I ever expected. Let me take you back a bit. My wife Clara and I were married for 35 wonderful years. She was my rock, my confidant, and the mother of my 2 children, Michael and Grace. Clara was the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel seen and heard. Losing her to cancer 5 years ago was like losing a part of myself. Michael and Grace are grown now with families of their own. We're still close, but it's not the same as having them under my roof. I am a retired teacher, and now I spend my days volunteering at the local library and tutoring high school kids in English. Teaching was my passion for over 40 years, and it still gives me purpose. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. I had spent the last 5 years rediscovering myself, traveling, reading, and enjoying my quiet moments. For years, I thought I'd never date again, but loneliness has a way of creeping up on you, especially after the holidays. After much persuasion from my daughter, I reluctantly joined a dating site for seniors. So I decided to give online dating a try, a leap of faith, if you will. Little did I know one evening would change everything. Sandra's profile stood out to me. She was 54, worked as an accountant, and described herself as adventurous, yet grounded. We exchanged a few messages, and I found her humor refreshing. She told me she loved traveling, cooking, had a soft spot for romantic comedies, and loved her alone time. But there was one detail that really intrigued me. She said she was looking for someone who wasn't afraid to embrace life's complexities. When I arrived at the restaurant, she was already there. She was wearing a striped off-white dress that complemented her short auburn hair. She greeted me with a warm smile that felt disarming. Over appetizers, we started sharing stories about our lives. I talked about Clara and my teaching years, and she opened up about her ex-husband and 2 daughters, both of whom lived out of state. Sandra's life had been full of twists and turns. She'd married young, and her marriage ended amicably after 20 years. She spoke about how she'd poured herself into her work as an accountant, but now she wanted to focus on passions like painting and ballroom dancing and traveling the world. There was something captivating about the way she described her zest for life. It was infectious. As the conversation deepened, she brought up the topic of intimacy. Now, I'll admit, it caught me off guard. She told me one of her fantasies was to try role-playing, something she thought was common among seniors but rarely talked about. She believed it could rekindle a sense of adventure in relationships. "Why not?" she said. "Life's too short for hesitation." Her confidence was both intimidating and intriguing. What do you think? Is this kind of openness refreshing? Or is it a bit too much for a first date? The conversation kept flowing effortlessly, and I found myself easing into the moment. However, as we continued, her tone began to shift. What began as light-hearted chatter took on a more serious edge. Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening yet firm, signaling the transition from casual pleasantries to a discussion of substance. She began by complimenting my openness and honesty, qualities she said she deeply valued. At first, I appreciated her candor. It's always better to lay everything out. But when she outlined her first condition, my perspective began to change. Sandra's first suggestion sounded practical at first glance, living together for 3 months to test our compatibility before any serious commitments. She called it a trial run, a way to iron out any wrinkles and see if we could actually cohabit peacefully. Now, I'm not one to shy away from logic, and I could see the merit in her idea. But something about the way she proposed it felt calculated. She said it so casually over dinner, almost as if this was standard protocol for dating in your 60s. I thought to myself, is this really how people test relationships these days? Living together before marriage was unheard of in my generation. But then again, times have changed. I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready to open up my space and my life this way again after years of living alone? And what about you? Would you agree to move in with someone so early in the relationship? Is it smart, or is it rushing things? I'd love to hear what you think. The second demand, a $25,000 commitment deposit. Now, this one left me floored. Sandra leaned in with this peculiar smile and said, "There's one more thing. I'd need you to put $25,000 into a shared account, just as a gesture of your commitment." I nearly choked on my drink. I couldn't tell if she was joking or testing me, but the look on her face was dead serious. She said it wasn't about the money. It was about trust. Trust? Since when did trust have a price tag? I've always believed trust is something you earn, not buy. And why $25,000? Why not $5,000 or $50,000? Where does one even come up with such a figure? It got me thinking about what Sandra might have been through in her past. Maybe she'd been burned before, betrayed, or taken advantage of financially. I couldn't blame her for wanting to protect herself, but at the same time, this felt excessive. Was this really about trust, or was there something deeper going on here? If you were in my shoes, how would you handle such a request? Would you consider it, or would it be a deal breaker? Do you think trust and money should ever mix in relationships? Ah, the Greece trip. This was her third demand. Sandra painted a beautiful picture, romantic sunsets in Santorini, dinners by the Aegean Sea, and lazy afternoons exploring ancient ruins. It sounded like a dream. But then she added the catch. I'll take care of the planning. You just need to cover the expenses. And by expenses, she meant flights, accommodations, meals, the whole 9 yards. Let me not forget to say. She even suggested we hire a professional photographer to document the trip. We could post the pictures on social media if we want, she said, with a sparkle in her eye. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against a good vacation. But this wasn't just a vacation. This was a test. It felt like she was saying, "Show me what you're willing to invest in me." And I couldn't help but wonder, was I falling into a trap where love was measured in dollar signs and photo ops? I've always been a simple man. I don't need grand gestures to feel connected to someone. For me, love is in the quiet moments, the ones without an audience. And yet, here I was, faced with a woman who seemed to believe that romance needed to be documented, framed, and shared with the world. Was this really what love looked like in the modern age? And then there was the fourth demand. If things worked out between us, Sandra wanted separate bedrooms. At first, I thought I misheard her, but she explained it plainly. I need my space, and I think having separate rooms is the key to a healthy relationship at our age. Now, I'll admit, I've heard of couples doing this, especially older couples, but it was the way she said it, with such finality, that made me pause. It felt less like a suggestion and more like a decree. I couldn't help but wonder, was this about personal boundaries, or was it about control? Was I about to enter a relationship where every aspect of our lives would be negotiated and compartmentalized? And then there was the question of finances. Sandra had made it clear she believed in managing money with discipline, and she thought she'd be the perfect person to handle my retirement funds. She said she'd allocate money to me monthly for my own good. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about love or companionship. This was about control. I started to see Sandra in a new light. She was smart, no doubt about it, but she was also someone who needed to be in charge. She had a plan for everything, and I started to wonder if I was just another piece in her puzzle. By the end of the evening, I realized Sandra and I had very different visions for what a relationship should look like. She was bold, intelligent, and confident, but her demands made me feel like I was auditioning for a role in her life, rather than building something together. As she spoke, I kept thinking about what Clara would have said. She believed in building relationships on mutual respect and understanding, not demands and tests. I realized Sandra and I had fundamentally different views on what love should look like. Politely told Sandra I wasn't the man she was looking for. I wished her well and left the restaurant feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It wasn't easy, but I knew I'd made the right choice. As she spoke, I found myself nodding politely, but inside I was panicking. Sandra was lovely, no doubt about it, but it was clear we were on two very different paths. When she paused to sip her wine, I excused myself to the restroom. Standing in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but laugh. What was I doing here? This wasn't going to work, and we both deserved someone who truly fit into our lives. So, I made a decision. I walked past our table, out the door, and into the night. As I strolled home, the cool air hitting my face, I felt relieved. Sandra was an incredible woman, but her demands were simply not for me. It made me wonder, though, how many of us settle for less or compromise too much, hoping things will change. What do you think about Sandra's demands? Were they reasonable, or do you think I dodged a bullet and was right to walk away? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Dating in your 60s is a whole new world, filled with surprises and lessons. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more reflections and tales from life's later chapters. Until next time, take care. No, seriously, like and subscribe. Also share this story to someone who you think should hear this too. Okay, take care.